My name is Samantha Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. As a software engineer, I've built a life most would envy, but it wasn't handed to me. Growing up, my parents made it clear my brother Ethan was their priority. When I was 22, they casually informed me I was getting nothing in their will, everything would go to him. For 10 years, I built my life without them. Then suddenly, they reappeared with desperate eyes and empty hands. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button while I take you through the heartbreaking journey that led to the most difficult decision of my life. I grew up in a modest 4-bedroom house in suburban Massachusetts, the kind of neighborhood where kids rode bikes until streetlights came on. From my earliest memories, there was always an invisible hierarchy in our home. My brother Ethan, 3 years my senior, somehow always occupied the top position in my parents' eyes. The pattern was subtle at first, my mother Laura packing special treats in Ethan's lunch, but forgetting mine. My father James attending every single one of Ethan's Little League games, while missing my science competitions even when I took first place. I remember sitting alone at my 7th grade science fair, watching other parents beam with pride while I explained my project on renewable energy to strangers. My certificate for first place still sits in a box somewhere and signed by either parent. Boys need more support to succeed in this world, my mother would say whenever I gathered enough courage to point out the disparity. Your brother struggles more than you do. You're naturally gifted, Samantha. What they never understood was how much their dismissal hurt. Being naturally gifted became a curse. It meant I deserved less attention, less celebration, less love. My 10th birthday remains particularly vivid in my memory. Mom had promised a small party at the local skating rink with 5 friends. I'd handed out invitations, picked out a special outfit, and even practiced skating all week so I wouldn't embarrass myself. The morning of my birthday, Ethan twisted his ankle at football practice. Not even a sprain, just a minor twist. My party was immediately canceled so both parents could take him to urgent care and then coddle him at home. My friends showed up to a locked skating rink, confused and holding presents. I spent my birthday in my room, alone with a hastily purchased cupcake my mother remembered to grab on their way back from the clinic. My Aunt Jessica, my father's sister, was the only one who seemed to notice. She arrived that evening, furious after receiving calls from my friends' parents. "This is unacceptable, James." I overheard her telling my father, "That little girl deserves better than to be an afterthought in this family." Dad's response was dismissive. "She's fine. She understands Ethan needed us." But I wasn't fine. I learned something crucial that day. I couldn't count on my parents. If I wanted anything in life, I would have to get it myself. By 13, I was babysitting for neighbors to earn my own money. At 15, I got a weekend job at the local library shelving books. I saved every dollar, knowing that unlike Ethan, who received a generous allowance, my future depended entirely on my own efforts. Despite the lack of parental support, or perhaps because of it, I excelled academically. Straight A's weren't an achievement in our house, they were my baseline expectation for myself. While my parents attended every one of Ethan's C-grade parent-teacher conferences with concern and support, they skipped mine, assuming everything was fine. "We're not worried about you, Sam," they'd say. "You've always got everything under control." My best friend Megan was the one who kept me sane during high school. Her family became my refuge. Her mother would actually ask about my day, remember my test dates, and celebrate my victories. Dinner at Megan's house was my first glimpse of what family support could look like. During my senior year, when the acceptance letter from MIT arrived with a partial scholarship, my parents' reaction was predictably lukewarm. "That's nice, honey," Mom said, barely looking up from preparing Ethan's favorite dinner. He had just been accepted to a private university with mediocre grades. They threw him a party. I didn't get a party. I got a nod and a reminder that I'd need to figure out how to pay the remaining tuition myself. "You're smart," Dad said, patting my shoulder. "You'll figure it out." That became their mantra, I would figure it out. And they were right. I always did. But not because they believed in me. Because I had no other choice. Move-in day at MIT was a study in contrasts. While other parents helped unpack, took photos, and tearfully hugged their children goodbye, I arrived alone with 2 suitcases and a backpack. My parents were helping Ethan settle into his luxury apartment near his university campus, the one they were paying for entirely, along with his tuition. The summer before college. I'd overheard them discussing finances. Ethan needs the support, Dad had said. Sam's got scholarships and she can work. She'll be fine. And so I worked. While other freshmen joined clubs and attended social events, I juggled 3 part-time jobs, morning shifts at the campus coffee shop, evening tutoring, and weekend data entry for a professor. I slept 4 hours most nights, but still maintained a 3.9 GPA. My roommate Ashley often expressed concern. "Sam, you're going to burn out," she'd say, watching me leave for my 5 a.m. shift. "Don't you think your parents could help a little?" I'd learned not to expect anything. The rare calls home were brief and centered around Ethan's college experience, his fraternity, his social life. His mediocre grades that somehow warranted hiring an expensive tutor. By sophomore year, even with my rigorous work schedule, I was struggling financially. Tuition had increased. And an unexpected medical bill pushed me to the edge. For the first time, I called home asking for help. "We just bought Ethan a car," Mom explained apologetically. "Money's a bit tight right now." That night, I seriously considered dropping out. But then Professor Kathleen Wilson, my computer science instructor, noticed my exhaustion in class and asked me to stay after. "You're one of the most talented students I've ever taught," she told me in her cluttered office. "Whatever's going on, we'll find a solution." She helped me apply for an additional scholarship and hired me as her research assistant, which paid better than my other jobs. Professor Wilson became the mentor I desperately needed, someone who saw my value when my own parents couldn't. "Your mind is exceptional, Samantha," she told me once. "Never let anyone make you believe your worth is tied to what others think of you." Those words became my lifeline. My friend circle expanded to include Zoe, a brilliant physics major who understood what it meant to forge your own path. Through her, I found a community of self-sufficient students who became my support system. When things got truly desperate during junior year, it was my Aunt Jessica who transferred money into my account with a note. "This isn't a loan. This is what family should do. I believe in you." I graduated with honors, my name among the top 5 in the computer science department. Professor Wilson sat in the family section at commencement, beaming with pride. Aunt Jessica drove 6 hours to be there. My parents sent a text that morning. "Sorry we can't make it. Ethan has a minor league game today. Good luck." As I accepted my diploma, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. The absence of my parents no longer felt like a gaping wound. It was just a fact of my life, as much a part of me as my determination and resilience. Professor Wilson hugged me after the ceremony. "The world isn't ready for you, Samantha Mitchell," she said. "But you're more than ready for it." I had no idea how true those words would prove to be. A week after graduation, my parents surprisingly invited me to dinner at our family home. I arrived hopeful, perhaps my academic achievements had finally registered. Maybe this was a peace offering, a chance to rebuild our relationship. The dining room table was set with the good china they usually reserved for holidays. My brother Ethan was noticeably absent. Mom had prepared my childhood favorite meal, lasagna with extra cheese. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe this dinner was for me. We ate with polite conversation about safe topics, the weather, the neighbors, Dad's golf game. Then, as Mom served coffee and store-bought cheesecake, they dropped their bombshell. "We've been thinking about the future," Dad began, stirring sugar into his cup. "And we want to be transparent about our estate planning." I nodded, not yet understanding where this was heading. "We've decided that everything will go to Ethan," Mom continued, her tone casual as if discussing a grocery list. "The house, the investments, the insurance policies, all of it." The cheesecake turned to ash in my mouth. "Everything. He'll need it more," Dad explained. "He's going to have a family to support someday." "I might have a family too," I said quietly. Mom patted my hand. "But you're so capable, Sam." You've always figured things out on your own. Ethan needs the security more than you do. The irony was staggering. My independence, forced upon me by their neglect, was now being used to justify further neglect. We're telling you this now so there are no surprises later, Dad added, as if he were doing me a favor. I set down my fork, stood up without a word, and walked out. They didn't follow me. They didn't call to apologize. In their minds, they'd done nothing wrong. I drove straight to Aunt Jessica's apartment, tears blurring my vision. She held me as I sobbed, my body finally releasing years of pent-up pain. I think I need to cut them off, I whispered when the tears subsided. Jessica stroked my hair. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into. The next morning, I applied for every tech job in Boston that matched my qualifications. A small startup called Datasphere offered me an entry-level position as a junior developer. The salary was modest, but it was enough to rent a tiny studio apartment and begin my independent life. For months, I oscillated between grief and anger. My therapist called it disenfranchised grief, mourning the parents I deserved but never had. I threw myself into work, using coding as therapy. When I couldn't sleep, I built programs. When sadness threatened to overwhelm me, I solved complex algorithms. Datasphere recognized my talent quickly. Within 8 months, I was promoted to senior developer. My solution for a particularly troublesome database issue caught the attention of the CTO, who became another important mentor. At a tech conference in San Francisco, I met Brian Taylor, a cybersecurity specialist with kind eyes and an easy laugh. Unlike other men I'd dated, he didn't seem intimidated by my technical knowledge or work ethic. Our relationship developed slowly through long-distance calls and weekend visits. The first time Brian took me home to meet his parents, Howard and Nancy Taylor welcomed me with genuine warmth. Watching Brian interact with his father, the easy affection, the inside jokes, the mutual respect, was like observing an alien species. Was this what normal father-son relationships looked like? Your parents must be so proud of everything you've accomplished, Nancy said over dinner. Brian knew my story. He squeezed my hand under the table as I replied, "We're not very close." After that visit, Brian said something I'll never forget. "Sam, you deserve people who celebrate you, not just tolerate you." 2 years into my career, I developed a proprietary algorithm that revolutionized how Datasphere handled security protocols. My work caught the attention of major tech companies. A firm in Seattle offered me a position with double my current salary and creative control over new security initiatives. Moving across the country felt symbolic, physically distancing myself from the ghosts of my childhood. In Seattle, I formed deep friendships, particularly with my colleague Daniel, who became like the brother Ethan never was. With my significantly increased salary, I began investing aggressively. Property, stocks, retirement funds. I educated myself about wealth management with the same intensity I'd applied to computer science. By 28, my net worth had crossed the 7-figure mark, all self-made, without a penny of family support or inheritance. Sometimes I would receive brief updates about my parents and Ethan through Aunt Jessica. Ethan had started and failed at several businesses. My parents had refinanced their house to support his ventures. They never asked about me. I had built my life brick by brick, constructing not just financial security, but a community of people who valued me for exactly who I was. The abandoned daughter had transformed herself into a self-sufficient woman who no longer waited for parental approval that would never come. The decade following my parents' announcement passed in a blur of professional triumphs and personal growth. Brian relocated to Seattle, and after 2 years of building our relationship, he proposed during a hiking trip to Mount Rainier. Our wedding was small but meaningful, attended by the family we had chosen: Aunt Jessica, Professor Wilson, my friends from MIT, and colleagues who had become much more than coworkers. Brian's parents embraced me completely. Nancy Taylor often called just to check in, sending care packages and remembering my birthday with thoughtful gifts. Howard taught me to fish and treated me with the paternal affection I'd always craved. Their genuine interest in my life was both healing and bittersweet. a constant reminder of what I'd missed with my own parents. "You're our daughter now," Nancy told me after the wedding. That's how family should be. My career trajectory continued its steep ascent. By 30, I had developed a revolutionary approach to data security that caught the attention of venture capitalists. With their backing, I founded my own company, Secure Frame, built around my proprietary software. The stress was enormous, but so was the satisfaction of creating something entirely mine. "You've always been a builder," Brian observed one night as I worked late. "Even when people tore things down around you." My marriage to Brian provided a stable foundation I'd never experienced before. He understood my drive, my occasional emotional walls, and my difficulty accepting help. More importantly, he gave me space to heal at my own pace. When Secure Frame's valuation hit 8 figures, a major tech corporation offered to acquire us. After intense negotiations, I agreed to sell, retaining creative control while gaining financial security beyond anything I could have imagined as that lonely girl in Massachusetts. We purchased our dream home in Seattle's Queen and neighborhood, a modernist structure with walls of glass overlooking Puget Sound. Sometimes, standing on the deck watching the sunset, I'd feel a momentary disbelief. How had that unwanted daughter created all this? Throughout these years, I maintained regular contact with Aunt Jessica. She had retired from teaching and moved to Portland, close enough for frequent visits. Our Sunday phone calls became sacred ritual. Unlike my parents, she asked questions about my work, remembered details about my friends, and celebrated my achievements without qualification. "Your parents don't know what they've missed," she told me once. And that's entirely their loss. Therapy with Dr. Rachel Morris became another cornerstone of my healing journey. Initially reluctant to waste time talking about my childhood, I eventually recognized how deeply my parents' neglect had shaped me. "You've succeeded not because of how they treated you, but in spite of it," Dr. Morris pointed out. "Imagine what you might have accomplished with supportive parents." That thought used to devastate me. Gradually, I learned to reframe it. The obstacles had forced me to develop extraordinary resilience and self-reliance. The gifts had come with terrible wrapping paper. As my financial security grew, so did my desire to help others. I established a mentorship program for young women in technology, particularly those from challenging backgrounds. Remembering Professor Wilson's impact on my life, I wanted to pay that forward. I also created a scholarship fund specifically for students without family financial support. Each year, we selected 5 recipients who demonstrated exceptional promise and determination. Meeting these brilliant young people, hearing their stories of overcoming family adversity, became one of my greatest joys. Through Aunt Jessica, I occasionally heard updates about my brother Ethan. His pattern remained consistent: grandiose business ideas followed by spectacular failures. He had burned through 3 marriages and numerous jobs. My parents continued financing his endeavors, remortgaging their home and depleting their retirement savings. "They're enabling him," Jessica said during one of our calls. "They think they're helping, but they're just postponing the inevitable crash." I felt nothing but distance when hearing these stories, no satisfaction in Ethan's failures, no resentment for the continued support he received. I had moved beyond that emotional landscape entirely. On my 32nd birthday, Brian surprised me with a bound journal. The inscription read, "For Samantha," who created her own story when others tried to write it for her. That night, I reflected on how far I'd come from that heartbroken 22-year-old who drove away from her parents' house vowing never to return. The pain had transformed into something else, not gone completely, but more like a scar than an open wound. I had built a beautiful life, surrounded by people who chose me every day. I had no idea that my carefully constructed peace was about to be tested in ways I never anticipated. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning as I sipped coffee and reviewed quarterly projections. The subject line was simple: "Hello from Mom." My coffee cup froze midair. 10 years of minimal contact, occasional obligatory holiday texts, a brief acknowledgement when I announced my marriage, and now, suddenly, an email. "Dearest Samantha," it began. an endearment she had never used during my childhood. Your father and I will be in Seattle next week and would love to see you. It's been too long. Could we meet for coffee? We're so proud of everything you've accomplished. I stared at those last words, so proud with disbelief. They had never expressed pride in my achievements before. Why now? After a decade of silence? That evening, I showed the email to Brian. His expression remained carefully neutral. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it. Another part is curious. Either way, I support you, he said, squeezing my hand. But remember what Dr. Morris said about maintaining boundaries. In my next therapy session, Dr. Morris helped me process my conflicted feelings. Meeting them doesn't mean you owe them anything, she reminded me. You're not that powerless child anymore. After 3 days of deliberation, I replied with a brief agreement to meet at a cafe near my office, neutral territory that would allow for a quick exit if necessary. The week passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. I found myself unable to focus on work, replaying potential scenarios in my mind. What did they want? Why no? I selected my outfit carefully, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence and success. Armor, in its way. They were already seated when I arrived at the cafe, looking older than I remembered. Mom's hair had gone completely gray. Dad seemed to have shrunk somewhat, his shoulders slightly stooped. For a moment, seeing them as simply aging humans rather than the towering figures of my childhood pain, I felt an unexpected twinge of compassion. Samantha. Mom stood up, arms outstretched as if we were regular family who saw each other routinely. I accepted her hug stiffly, then shook Dad's hand. The formality of the gesture wasn't lost on him. A flicker of something crossed his face before his usual jovial mask returned. Look at you, Mom said, her voice overly bright. So successful and beautiful. We've been following your career, you know. Everyone back home knows about our daughter, the tech genius. The possessive, our daughter, landed like a false note. They had never claimed me this way before. How have you been? I asked politely, ordering a black coffee from the hovering waitress. What followed was 20 minutes of superficial catching up. Mom dominated the conversation, filling silences with stories about neighbors I barely remembered and distant relatives I'd never met. Dad remained mostly quiet, occasionally nodding or adding brief comments. Neither asked specific questions about my life or work, nothing that indicated genuine interest in the person I had become. Then, as our cups emptied, the conversation shifted. We've had some difficult times recently, Mom said, her cheerful tone faltering. Ethan's business, well, it didn't work out as planned. Dad cleared his throat. The restaurant supply company. We invested quite heavily in it. Your retirement funds? I asked, already knowing the answer. Mom nodded, tears forming. Everything. And the house too. We took out a second mortgage. Now the bank is foreclosing, Dad continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. We'll lose the home we've lived in for 40 years. I waited, sensing there was more to this story than parental concern for my brother. Ethan has another business idea, Mom said, brightening slightly. A tech concept, actually. Something about online security for small businesses. My field. Of course. He needs investors, Dad added. And we thought, well, since you've done so well in that area. The request hung in the air between us. I took a deliberate sip of coffee, using the moment to compose my thoughts. How much are you asking for? I finally said. They exchanged glances. 500,000, Dad replied. It would save our house and give Ethan the fresh start he needs. $500,000. Not for a loan, but as an investment in my perpetually failing brother's latest scheme. The audacity was breathtaking. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Mom added quickly. Family always comes first. After all, those words, family always comes first, sparked something in me. A memory of sitting alone at countless dinners, school events, and achievements while they prioritized Ethan. I'll need to think about it, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional turmoil beneath. I'll have my financial advisor look into Ethan's business plan. Relief washed over their faces. They had interpreted my non-refusal as eventual agreement. We knew we could count on you, Mom said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. You've always been our rock. As I walked back to my office, the truth crystallized with painful clarity. After a decade of absence, they had resurfaced not because they missed me or regretted their treatment of me. They had come because they needed something only I could provide. I wasn't their daughter. I was their contingency plan. The next morning, I asked my assistant to clear my schedule and called Claire Andrews, my financial advisor. Without explaining the personal dynamics, I asked her to look into a restaurant supply business that had recently failed in Massachusetts and to research any new business registrations under Ethan Mitchell's name. Just doing some due diligence, I explained. While waiting for Claire's findings, I found myself uncharacteristically distracted. Brian noticed my preoccupation when I absent-mindedly put salt instead of sugar in my evening tea. Talk to me, he said, taking the ruined tea and replacing it with a fresh cup. I explained the full situation, my parents' request, the amount, and my suspicions about their true motives. What would you do if this weren't your family? Brian asked. If these were strangers approaching you for investment? I'd want to see a business plan, financial projections, market analysis, I answered immediately. I'd research their track record and the viability of the concept. And if those didn't check out, I'd decline the investment. Brian nodded. Maybe that's your answer then. Treat this as the business transaction they're making it, not the emotional manipulation they're hoping for. The following day, Claire called with her findings. Ethan's restaurant supply venture had collapsed under massive debt, not just business loans, but gambling debts disguised as business expenses. More concerning, this wasn't his first failure. 5 previous businesses had ended similarly, each time with increasing financial losses. There's no new business registration yet, Claire added. But frankly, based on this pattern, I would strongly advise against any investment in his ventures. That evening, I called Aunt Jessica. They've approached you for money, haven't they? She said before I could even explain. I wondered when they would. You knew they would ask? They've been hinting about your success for months, asking me questions about your company sale. I shut it down. But I knew they'd go directly to you eventually. What should I do? I asked, feeling suddenly like a child seeking guidance. What do you want to do? She countered. Part of me wants to help. I admitted. Not for them, but because refusing feels like I'm being as callous as they were. Samantha, Jessica said firmly, you owe them nothing. Not a penny, not an explanation. Not a moment of guilt. They made their choice years ago when they decided you weren't worth investing in. You're not obligated to save them from the consequences of their decisions. After our call, I sat on the deck watching the sunset, letting Jessica's words sink in. She was right, this wasn't about money. It was about recognizing my own worth when they never had. I arranged to meet my parents at their hotel 2 days later. This time, I arrived first, selecting a quiet corner of the lobby with enough privacy for our conversation. When they appeared, their expressions were hopeful. They believed I was bringing good news. Thank you for meeting us again, Mom said, clutching her purse tightly. Have you had time to consider our request? I have. I replied calmly. I've done some research into Ethan's business history and the details of his current proposal. Dad shifted uncomfortably. We know there have been some setbacks. 7 failed businesses, I corrected. With increasing debt each time. And evidence of gambling problems disguised as business expenses. Their faces registered shock, then embarrassment. They hadn't expected me to investigate. Everyone deserves second chances, Mom said weakly. This would be his 8th chance, I pointed out. And from what I can see, there isn't even a concrete business plan yet, just an idea. Dad's expression hardened. So, you're refusing to help? I'm refusing to invest in a business venture that shows every sign of failing, I clarified. But I am willing to help in other ways. I can connect Ethan with small business mentors. I can help you both consult with financial advisors about restructuring your debt. I can. We don't need advice, Dad interrupted, his voice rising. We need money. James, Mom said in a warning tone. No, Laura. Let's be honest here. He leaned forward, anger evident in his reddening face. We've come all this way because our daughter has millions while we're about to be homeless. The least she could do is help after everything we've done for her. There it was, the breaking point. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Like what, exactly? Canceling my birthday party for Ethan's twisted ankle? Missing my college graduation for his baseball game? Telling me at 22 that I deserved nothing in your will because I was too capable. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We gave you a home. An education. I put myself through college, I corrected. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a nearly perfect GPA. I built my career without a single contact or recommendation from either of you. I created my own home when you made it clear I wasn't a priority in yours. You're being selfish, Dad accused. This is your family asking for help. Family goes both ways, I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. Family supports each other consistently, not just when they need something. For 10 years. You've made no effort to be part of my life. You didn't call when my company launched. You sent a text message for my wedding. You've never once visited Seattle until you needed money. Mom was openly crying now. We've always loved you, Samantha. Maybe you have, in your way, I conceded. But love without action, without demonstration, without sacrifice, what is that worth? I stood up, gathering my purse. My answer is no. I won't be investing in Ethan's business or paying off your mortgage. Not because I can't afford it, but because it wouldn't actually help any of us in the long run. It would just perpetuate the same dynamic we've always had. Dad's face darkened. You'll regret this decision when we're living in some terrible apartment and have lost everything. I've lived with regret my entire life, I replied. Regret that I couldn't make you love me as much as you loved Ethan. Regret that no achievement of mine ever seemed enough. I'm done with regret. I handed them a business card. This is the contact information for an excellent financial advisor in your area. If you want actual help rebuilding your lives, call her. I'll cover the consultation fees. As I walked away, Mom called after me, Samantha, please. We're your parents. I turned back one last time. Yes, you are. And I've accepted that reality, both the good and the bad of it. I hope someday you can accept who I am too. The hotel doors closed behind me, and I stepped into the bright Seattle afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision hadn't been about the money at all. It had been about finally recognizing my own worth when they couldn't or wouldn't see it. The aftermath of my confrontation with my parents wasn't the clean resolution Hollywood might have scripted. There was no dramatic phone call with tearful apologies. No sudden recognition of past wrongs. Instead, the days following our meeting brought a complex mixture of emotions, relief intertwined with lingering sadness, confidence shadowed by occasional doubt. You did the right thing, Brian reassured me as I questioned my decision for the dozenth time. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Dr. Morris dedicated several sessions to helping me process the encounter. Your parents activated all your old wounds, she observed. The child within you still craves their approval, even while the adult you knows their behavior is unacceptable. I keep wondering if I should have helped them despite everything, I admitted. Would giving them money have fixed the underlying relationship issues? She asked. We both knew the answer. Financial assistance without fundamental change would have been a bandage on a broken bone, temporary relief that ultimately solved nothing. 2 weeks after our meeting, Aunt Jessica called with news. They sold the house, she said. Got less than market value, but enough to clear most of the debt. They've moved in with Ethan for now. How are they? I asked, surprised by my own concern. Angry, she replied honestly. Your mother cried when she told me about your refusal. Your father says you've forgotten where you came from. Neither seems to understand why their approach backfired. I had expected as much. And you? Do you think I made a mistake? Samantha, Jessica's voice was firm. You offered them genuine help, financial counseling, career connections for Ethan. They wanted a bailout without addressing the underlying problems. You respected them enough to not enable more dysfunction. Her validation meant more than I could express. In the months that followed, I channeled my emotional energy into expanding my mentorship program. We launched a special initiative for young women estranged from their families, providing not just professional guidance, but community and emotional support. During one mentorship session, A brilliant 20-year-old computer science student named Alicia shared her story of parents who belittled her tech ambitions, pushing her toward more feminine pursuits. "They think coding is a waste of time," she said, frustration evident. "Nothing I achieve seems to matter." Looking at her, talented, determined, and wounded by parental dismissal, was like seeing my younger self. "Their limitations aren't yours," I told her. "Build your life around people who celebrate your gifts rather than diminish them." The advice I gave so easily to Alicia was what I was still learning to fully embody myself. 3 months after our Seattle meeting, I sent my parents a letter. Not an email or text, a handwritten letter on heavy stationery that conveyed the weight of my words. I didn't apologize for refusing their request, but I did express sadness over the state of our relationship. I outlined boundaries I needed respected, but also opened the door to rebuilding our connection on healthier terms if they were willing to acknowledge past patterns and commit to change. "I don't need perfection," I wrote. "Just genuine effort and mutual respect." The letter went unanswered. Through Jessica, I learned they'd shown it to Ethan, who dismissed it as self-important psychobabble. Their silence was both expected and disappointing. But unlike the abandoned child who once desperately sought their approval, I recognized their response as a reflection of their limitations, not my worth. My relationship with Aunt Jessica deepened further. She sold her Portland condo and moved to Seattle, where we established a weekly dinner tradition. At 65, she had more energy and curiosity than many people decades younger. "You're the daughter I never had," she told me one evening as we cooked together in my kitchen. "I hope you know how proud I am of the woman you've become." Brian and I began discussing starting our own family, a prospect that both excited and terrified me. "What if I don't know how to be a good parent?" I confessed one night. "I don't exactly have the best models." Brian's response was characteristically thoughtful. "You know exactly what not to do," he pointed out. "And you've spent years healing and building healthy relationships. That's more preparation than most people have." He was right. My parents had unwittingly given me a powerful lesson in what children truly need, not just material provision, but consistent emotional presence, celebration of uniqueness, and unconditional support. The scholarship fund I had established continued to grow. We named it the Self-Reliance Fund, a nod to my own journey and the extraordinary young people we supported. Each year, I personally met with recipients, sharing parts of my story to let them know they weren't alone. "Family isn't just blood," I would tell them. "It's the people who show up, who see your value, who help you become your best self." 6 months after our confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my father. It was brief and businesslike, asking if my offer of financial counseling was still available. They had exhausted their resources and needed professional guidance. I arranged and paid for 6 months of comprehensive financial counseling. We didn't speak directly, all communication happened through the financial advisor, but it was a small step. They were finally accepting help on the terms I had offered, rather than demanding it on their terms. Whether this would lead to meaningful reconciliation remained uncertain. But I had learned that some relationships can only be healed through firm boundaries and radical acceptance of what is, rather than wishful thinking about what might be. On difficult days, I returned to Professor Wilson's words from long ago: "Your worth is not tied to what others think of you." The frightened, neglected girl from Massachusetts had grown into a woman who finally believed that truth. My journey from abandonment to empowerment wasn't about money or success, though I had achieved both. It was about reclaiming my narrative, choosing my family of the heart, and breaking the cycle of conditional love. For anyone watching who might see their own story reflected in mine, remember this: you can't control how others treat you, but you can decide what treatment you'll accept. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and others, is to say no when yes would only perpetuate harm. What difficult boundaries have you had to set in your own life? How did it feel to finally stand up for yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it, and sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build yourself. Thank you for letting me share my journey with you. And I wish you strength in creating the life you deserve.